Mass anti-Trump administration rallies have begun across the US under the banner of the No Kings movement. Millions of people are expected to take part in over 2,500 demonstrations nationwide. Protesters say they're standing up to President Donald Trump's authoritarian policies, declaring that America does not have a king, and they're accusing Trump of believing that his rule is absolute. Several million protesters joined a similar mass demonstration back in June, one of the largest in US history. Top Republicans have condemned the gatherings. And DW correspondent Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber is following the protests in Washington, D.C. Earlier, he told me more about what the protesters are demanding.
As the No Kings protest name says, many of the protesters are accusing President Trump of acting rather like a monarch than an elected official. They are accusing him on attacks on the First Amendment. It's a very diverse crowd gathering here in Washington, D.C. on Pennsylvania Avenue. A large crowd stretching for several city blocks. There is a stage there, and we've seen pictures from other big cities here in the United States, from New York and also from Boston. More than 2,500 bigger and smaller cities are taking part in this protest here, and organizers are expecting today's protest to be even bigger than the last nationwide Kings protest that we saw in June here in the US.
And Benjamin, how are Donald Trump and his allies reacting to what's going on?
The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Republican Mike Johnson, called this a hating America protest. Many have been using this rhetoric of trying to paint or trying to blame the protesters, those who are heading out on the street to protest against the Trump administration, as being anti-American, anti-patriots. But we've seen many American flags and many of the protesters trying to change that. A huge crowd, of course, many different motives for those who are out here today. Some attacking, some criticizing the Trump administration, especially also for the raids that we've seen with ICE, with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. There's a lot of police also surrounding this area, and that's of course one of the bigger concerns also in the protests in Chicago, where recently we've seen this increase of law enforcement, of Border Patrol, of ICE carrying out those operations. So that's something that the speakers on stage are referring over and over again, criticizing that crackdown by the Trump administration.
Yeah, and Benjamin, some states have deployed National Guard troops. How big are the concerns that these protests could escalate?
So here in Washington, the National Guard is rather on places that are really touristy. We've seen them on metro stations, where many of the protesters here arrived today, because a lot of the downtown area has been closed off for vehicles. So many of them approached this area with the subway. But that's one of the bigger concerns that they have. If in case some of these protests might turn violent also later in the afternoon, later in the evening, with this increased law enforcement, with the National Guard that has been deployed here in the city as part of the visuals of many of the tourists that we also just had a moment to talk to some of them, that there are deployed to cities like Washington, also to Chicago. There's been this back and forth also that they were not able to deploy. It was the National Guard of Texas, but that is one of the bigger concerns, and also one of the bigger changes if we compare today's protest with the one that we saw in June of this nationwide No Kings protest in the US.
That was DW correspondent Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber in Washington, D.C. Thanks a lot, Benjamin.